life shouldn't be like this. Diamond Davion should be here. She belongs in prison.
Mackenzie Shirilla, the teenager convicted of intentionally driving her car into a brick wall, killing 2 young men. When a judge sentenced killer Mackenzie Shirilla to prison in 2023, the teenager appeared stunned.
She's sentenced on count 2, the murder of Davion Flanagan, 15 years to life. She's sentenced on count 1, the murder of Dominic Russo, 15 years to life, to be served concurrent to each other with credit for time served.
The judge determined, since this was a bench trial, the case was tried before a judge, not a jury, so a judge determined that Ohio prosecutors had proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Mackenzie Shirilla had driven her car into the side of a brick building on purpose.
A summer morning in Ohio, a Toyota Camry sped down a nearly deserted road. The streetlights faded. Traffic cameras only managed to capture a few seconds of white light piercing the night. Then, a head-on crash into a brick wall. The reported speed was nearly 160 kilometers per hour. 2 young men died at the scene. The driver survived. And from that moment, America began to split into 2 sides. One side believed it was a youthful tragedy, an impulsive decision made in a few seconds of lost control. But the other side looked at the timeline of that night and saw something far colder. A text message at nearly 3 a.m. No skid marks. No attempt to swerve to avoid the collision. No last-ditch reaction, the kind one usually sees when survival instinct kicks in. Just a straight dash through the darkness. The stability is inexplicable. And what keeps this case haunting is the question that never fades. Was this truly an accident, or a cold-blooded decision made in a matter of seconds early morning on the 31st of July 2022? As the city sank into sleep, a silent darkness enveloped the deserted streets. The peaceful atmosphere was suddenly shattered by the roar of an engine in the distance. It was a fateful dawn, the moment the gears of destiny began to turn, leading those involved on a journey with no return ticket. Inside the Toyota Camry were 3 young people. The driver, Mackenzie, sat behind the wheel with her 2 friends, Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan, in the passenger seat. The journey seemed like a familiar stretch of road home. No one suspected these would be their last moments, seeing the streetlights flash by before darkness engulfed all hope. What was the atmosphere like in the cabin? What were the last words spoken? No one but the driver could recount it. But the system data extracted afterward painted a chilling picture. The car accelerated relentlessly. The speed was pushed to extreme levels, far exceeding all safety limits. There was no sign of slowing down, and what should have been there was missing. Absolutely no attempt to brake was registered by the system. The car sped like an arrow through the air, stuck in an irreversible trajectory. That was the point of no return, the most brutal boundary. Everything ended in a flash when the car crashed head-on into a solid brick wall. The lives of the 2 young men ended forever, leaving behind a legal mystery that shocked America. 3 people boarded that car, but only 1 could return. When confronted with the scene of a serious accident, our first instinct is often to blame bad luck. A moment of inattention, slippery roads, or a sudden technical malfunction. This is also the initial hypothesis investigators often pursue. However, modern cars always conceal a silent witness that never panics and never lies: the event data recorder ADR. And when experts successfully extracted the code from the system, the story it told completely changed the course of the case. Normally, when a driver realizes they are facing danger, their natural survival instinct immediately kicks in. The brain orders the feet to slam on the brakes and the hands to steer in a desperate fight for survival. However, the report from Mackenzie's Camry's ADR revealed a chilling absence of that instinct. Why is the 0% braking reading so decisive? Because the reflex to reject death is an automatic mechanism of the brain, not a choice. System data indicates that during the final 5 seconds before impact, the accelerator pedal was pressed firmly and held at 100%. The car continuously accelerated, hurtling coldly into the night. But the most haunting detail is not the soaring speed readings, but a perfect 0. Sorry, the braking system was not activated at all. There wasn't a single tap of the brakes, not a fraction of a second of hesitation. Throughout those fateful moments, the only restraint was 0. The nature of the event was no longer loss of control. Far more terrifying, it was a refusal to stop. To verify these dry numbers, the police analyzed the area's security camera footage. The blurry footage shattered the last glimmer of hope for an unintentional accident. The camera footage showed that as the car approached the wall, it didn't slide freely, as if the driver had fainted or fallen asleep. Instead, the car made a sharp turn, a clear change of direction, adjusting its trajectory to head straight into the most solid surface. At this moment, the perspective of those observing the case began to shift. The initial shock and sorrow immediately gave way to a chilling doubt. Why the gas pedal instead of the brake? Why deliberately steer the car into a dead end? All the data no longer tells the story of an unfortunate accident, but outlines a deep-seated plan. The car never tried to stop. The line between an unintentional accident and a deliberate crime is sometimes as thin as a blink of an eye. Welcome back to the channel. If you are passionate about analyzing the hidden aspects of human psychology and want to join me in uncovering the truth behind the most mysterious cases, please take a second to subscribe and turn on notifications. Now let's go back in time and enter the courtroom to see what really happened on that night's journey. When the courtroom doors officially closed, the battle shifted from the wrecked scene to a far more intense and complex arena, a psychological and legal battle. Here, the dry system data was only half the truth. The other half, infinitely more difficult, was deciphering the true thought processes that unfolded in the driver's mind during those brief seconds. The defense team established a defensive line that strongly appealed to the jury's empathy. They didn't deny the numbers from the measurement system, but they presented a medical piece to explain it all: postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome (POTS). According to their defense, Mackenzie had gone into a state of unconsciousness, a complete blackout at the wheel. Her mind was like a tape reel, abruptly cut, all memory of that fateful moment wiped clean. From this perspective, the lack of a braking reflex is not an act of cruelty, but merely a physiological event beyond the control of a failing body. However, the prosecution immediately countered with extremely sharp analytical facts. Going into detail, they pointed out what should have been there but was missing. The prosecution argued that there was no strong prior record to prove she suffered from this condition. The test results also definitively ruled out alcohol or stimulants. Most importantly, the acceleration pattern showed a cycle of acceleration that was too stable, too smooth, and too decisive to be the unconscious movement of someone who was unconscious. The entire courtroom fell into a tense silence. The emotions of those following the case were stretched taut, constantly fluctuating on a thin line between sympathy and profound skepticism. No one dared to draw an absolute conclusion without being able to see through the human heart. Everything at this point remained open questions, delving deep into psychology. Was it truly a short circuit in the brain causing loss of consciousness, a sudden outburst of rage, a blind impulse, or was it a carefully calculated act and enforced with chilling composure? The entire internal conflict of the justice system ultimately revolves around a single knot. As investigators began sifting through digital records and deciphering call history, the case officially transcended the boundaries of a typical traffic incident. The content in this video is for informational and reference purposes only. Although it has been cross-referenced with reputable sources, some details may have changed or may not be entirely accurate. The picture that emerged wasn't one of a peaceful friendship, but rather a reflection of a deeply unsettling psychological loop. They uncovered the fragmented pieces of a toxic relationship shaped by persistent conflicts and the suffocating tension of an impending breakup. Witnesses began providing testimony about a series of heated arguments, even claims of negative reckless driving behavior, road rage in the past. Clearly, the instability wasn't something that appeared suddenly, but had been simmering like a ticking time bomb. But the climax of this dark period didn't stop at rumors. It lay in the completely real data files. Among the recovered evidence, an audio recording revealed the coldest dark side, the sound of someone uttering threats to scratch the paint of their opponent's car in a fit of extreme rage. Our perspective has now been completely reversed. This is no longer a matter of a road accident. What we are facing is a complex psychological profile where negative emotions are repressed to the extreme. The incident in the car that night, after all, may have been the final outburst of a long-running psychological battle. Preventive recording of arguments. In behavioral psychology, there's a truth that always makes us ponder and sometimes shudder. People aren't usually so afraid of a single moment of losing control. What truly haunts them are the recurring patterns of negative behavior. As the trial entered its most tense phase, the prosecution made a decisive move. They temporarily shifted their attention from the scene to revisit the old case files. A wealth of evidence, past threats, angry text messages, and erratic behavior was officially revealed to the jury. At that moment, the atmosphere in the courtroom froze. The prosecution's purpose was incredibly sharp. They weren't presenting this data simply to judge the driver's personal life or character. They transformed it into steel pieces to build 3 solid pillars, locking down all escape routes, the motive, the intent, and the complete rejection of the hypothesis of unintentional error, absence of mistake. They wanted to prove that a decisive, smooth acceleration, with no sign of hesitation from the braking system, could not possibly be a coincidence or a sudden fainting spell. It was at this very moment that the past began to cast thick, heavy shadows, completely enveloping the scene of that fateful night. Old patterns of behavior had overshadowed the boundaries of a typical collision. All gazes towards the witness stand immediately shifted. People no longer saw an isolated incident, but the climax of a domino effect that had been simmering for months. That night perhaps was merely the moment the final piece was knocked over. This psychological perspective created an invisible pressure, forcing those in positions of power to confront a far more shocking truth. The past has interred the court. Behind the cold iron doors and soulless concrete walls of the prison, a new chapter in the case officially unfolds through the lens of the documentary The Crash. For the first time since the fateful trial, the driver decides to face the public directly. No longer hidden behind her defense team in her prison uniform, she speaks directly, clinging to a last glimmer of hope for her innocence. "I am not a murderer. I had absolutely no intention of committing murder." However, the moment those words of explanation were broadcast, a very peculiar psychological phenomenon occurred. The audience, millions of people sitting behind their screens, suddenly shifted their reception completely. The tension escalated not because of the sensational new details revealed, but because viewers were unconsciously drawn into a state of intense focus called "Watch Her Closely." At this moment, they are no longer simply passively listening to a story. The public's brain automatically switches to the sharp, analytical state of psychological experts. They begin to read the smallest details on the face, an unconscious shift in gaze, a hesitant blink, a subtle tremor at the corner of the mouth, or the way she controls her breathing as she recalls that terrifying night. The audience is reading behavior, reading the emotions being revealed, and most importantly, they yearn to read the truth behind the tears. Is it the ultimate pain of a person suffering an unforeseen tragedy, or merely a masterful psychological performance designed to manipulate the crowd's sympathy? In the digital age, the legal verdict may have been pronounced, but the invisible court of public opinion never closes. Every frame is fragmented, slowed down, and mercilessly dissected across tens of thousands of forums. The interview, initially born with a desire to clear her name, suddenly became a cold, sharp lens, exaggerating all pre-existing doubts. She wanted to tell her story herself, but the entire internet was ready to monitor her. When the final legal efforts were submitted, the faint glimmer of hope for a reversal was quickly crushed by the cold indifference of the judicial machine. The defenses of the legal team crumbled one after another before the unwavering verdicts. The formal appeal was rejected. All electronic evidence from the black box remained valid. The court's decision to try the case as a grown man was completely unshakable. Even the desperate attempt to reach the Supreme Court was met with absolute silence. A suffocating feeling began to engulf the court. The case had now transformed into a hopeless, trapped narrative. No matter how much they struggled before the media or offered sugary explanations, those behind bars realized a harsh truth. They could not escape a judicial system that operated entirely on technical evidence and emotionless data. No exceptions, no leniency. Every door of hope was slammed shut. The system remained unshattered. Sometimes the end of a case doesn't come from groundbreaking new evidence, nor from the prosecution's sharp arguments. Sadly, it comes from something far more bitter and ironic: human error. As the legal team frantically prepared their appeal for leniency, a fatal mistake occurred. The last glimmer of hope was immediately slammed shut, not because their defense lacked persuasiveness, but simply because they missed the deadline for filing. And how long did that delay last? Not a month, not a week. The report noted a delay of exactly 24 hours. In the cold machinery of justice, time never shows mercy. A suffocating, utterly helpless feeling enveloped me as I realized the future was no longer determined by hidden truths, but locked away by the ticking of a clock. Just one rotation of the earth, one fleeting day, had forever stripped away any chance of turning the tables. One day late, and everything changed completely. Amidst the thick stacks of legal documents and heated debates over data, there was a heart-wrenching silence that no verdict could measure. It was the profound pain of those left behind. At the podium, Dominic's sister stepped forward. Ignoring the dry legal jargon, she confronted the driver on that fateful night and uttered a sentence that silenced the entire courtroom. She didn't care at all. What devastated the family was not just the permanent loss of their loved one. What crushed them was the empty attitude from the other side of the jury. Not a single tear of remorse. Not a single sincere apology. That chilling silence was a second blow, crushing already broken hearts. The climax of this case lies not in the legal system. It lies in the abyss of sorrow, grief, where one realizes that the greatest cruelty is sometimes indifference. He's gone forever, but she goes on to live. When the judge's gavel struck for the final moment, the case should have ended. But no, it only opened a new battlefield, bursting from the four walls of the courtroom to become a fierce culture war in cyberspace. Thousands of indignant signatures have been collected in a campaign calling for an update to the Son of Sam Act. The core objective: to cut off all avenues of profit for individuals caught in the crossfires of the very tragedies in which they are the main characters. The terrifying truth is that we are living in a notoriety economy. Their glamorous documentaries or viral TikTok clips can easily turn a controversial name into a media phenomenon. The masses bitterly realize that a legal sentence may strip a person of their freedom, but social media algorithms are ready to give them a giant microphone. The line between a profile that needs to be judged and a piece of entertainment that generates money has completely blurred. In the social media age, attention is currency. Looking back at all the pieces of this case, what do we see? It's a cold black box of data with a perfect zero where the brakes fail. It's an intensely tense legal battle revolving around the thin line between intention. It's the grim picture of a toxic relationship exposed along with the suffocating pressure of every expression dissected by public opinion through the lens of a documentary. Even the most desperate appeals completely collapse before the judicial machine, leaving a society more deeply divided than ever. But after all the behavioral analysis and endless courtroom battles, what do we really have? Absolutely no complete closure, no single answer that can satisfy everyone. The only thing that remains is the profound pain of families who have lost loved ones and the never-ending fire of debate on online forums. And above all, there remains a perpetually buried mystery about what truly went through the driver's mind in those fleeting seconds. After all, in that life or death moment, what should have been there but was absent? Accident range or something in between. After uncovering all the technical evidence and psychological complexities of this case, what about you? Which hypothesis do you lean towards regarding that fateful night ride? Was it truly a moment of complete bodily loss, or a cold, deliberate decision made and executed in a matter of seconds? Leave your choice in the comments below. A. An unintentional tragic incident. B. A spontaneous psychological impulse. C. A calculated act. Each of your perspectives can offer a new angle on this case. And if you're passionate about deciphering mysterious files where silent data, behavioral analysis, and even the smallest details can turn the whole story upside down, then subscribe to Today Crime Records right now. Thank you for watching until the very end. See you in the next episode.